Okay. All right. Good evening, everyone. I'm going to call the regular governing board meeting for DVUSD to order at 7:01 p.m. on Tuesday, November 15th, 2022. Please let roll call reflect that all board members are present except Mrs. Paperman, who is absent. Mrs. Fisher is on the telephone, correct, Mrs. Fisher?
Yes, I'm here.
Wonderful. So if you will please join me with the Pledge of Allegiance to be followed by a moment of silence. Yes, Mrs. Ordway.
I just wanted to have this moment of silence thinking of Mrs. Cindy Redbread Nyman, who was a principal. I don't know if she was a teacher here, but she certainly was our interim superintendent for a few years, and she sadly passed away. So I thought I would remember her tonight.
Please be seated. I'm going to make a motion to adopt the agenda, removing 5B, or I should say moving 5B to be after 5M. Do I have a second?
I second.
A motion and a second. All those in favor, please say aye.
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 Aye. Any opposed, please say nay. Mrs. Fisher?
Aye.
Sorry, was that a yes?
Correct. I also voted online.
Thank you. So sorry. And Mrs. Fisher, you should know that Mrs. Taylor is not with us in person. She's also virtual, so I can't look to her to ask her for votes, unfortunately. So the motion passes unanimously. Thank you for bearing with us with our technical difficulties. All right. Our next item on our agenda is district reports. And so for our finance reports, we'll go to Mrs. Mock.
Thank you, President O'Brien, members of the board, Dr. Finch, and guests. This evening, we will be presenting our district enrollment report for the month ending October of 2022. Our last report of October had us reporting for about the 58th day in session, at which time we had 32,726 students, which is still just a slight decrease from the number of students we had enrolled last year. So it's negative 0.4% change from the same time last year. We do expect still to see some increase in future enrollment reports, but this was our last report for the month of October, and with that, I will take any enrollment questions.
Are there any questions? Okay, thank you. All right, next report.
President O'Brien, members of the board, Dr. Finch, and guests, our next report for this evening is going to be our M&O budget report for the month ending October 22. We are tracking with our spending very similarly to where we were this time last year. Not that we always compare M&O to this time last year, but our comparison, unfortunately, is mostly with vacancies. And that we do have about $82 million of our total budget for FY23 spent, with about $25 million of that in certified staff contracts. But we still have $80 million encumbered, and in committed budget balances, we have about $18.7 million. In all of our categories, we actually have a significant committed budget balance, not necessarily that we believe we're going to spend that budget balance in those categories. But if you will turn your eye to the bottom of the report, the Arizona Department of Education by November 1st has to calculate the specific amount that each district may be over for the aggregate expenditure limit. So up until now, we've been reporting that Deer Valley had an estimated $43.5 million that we may have to cut from our current budget, that the state is calculating that we are currently over budgeted, not based on the amount of monies that we were allocated in revenue, but because of a statewide formula for expenditures. And with that new recalculation, Deer Valley's portion of the $1.3 billion across the state that every public school district, excluding charter schools, and ESAs would have to reduce potentially this current year. Our new portion is $46.7 million, so our portion has increased slightly. We also have an update on our fiscal year 22 carry forward. When we finished our annual financial report that was approved by the governing board back in October, we do have a slight increase to our M&O carry forward of just under $3 million. So we have $13 million that we did not allocate. They were late allocations from the state legislature. And then with that additional 2.8 in M&O carry forward, we have about $15.8 million from our current year that is not allocated. We are working through our negotiated solutions team on a plan for those funds should the aggregate expenditure limit be rectified by the state legislature, which we are expecting and hope to happen, but has to happen by March 1st. In addition, we do have a slight decrease in our enrollment, as we mentioned in the last report. So we have on that bottom line that a 1% decrease in our average daily membership, or our ADM, is equivalent to about $2 million. So those are not funds that we've had to reduce at this time, but they are just making sure that it is known what that could equal to us if we're not able to get our ADM up by the 100th day, which is in January. And I will take any questions on the M&O report.
So Mrs. Mock, currently we're at a shortage of approximately 0.4%.
That would be correct. If we have to reduce our budget the current year, correct.
If we had to, that's what it would be based on. So the 46.7 million is just the AEL potential reduction, and then the next line below that would be whatever potential shortage we have for enrollment. And I see that you've put it at 1%. I would imagine because you don't believe it would go over.
Correct.
1%.
And that's more of a number to use as a multiplier, that if we needed to go 0.5%, it just makes it easier to do some quick math when we have those questions.
Okay, I appreciate that. Any other questions or comments? Okay. Oh, yep, Mrs. Ordway?
Have you heard any thing that would be mildly encouraging about a special session to cure the aggregate spending limit?
Vice President Ordway, President O'Brien, members of the board, nothing is certain until it happens. There's definitely speculation from lobbyists for the district. We do not believe at this time that it would be rectified probably until January at the earliest, but we do believe that the political environment is favorable for it to be rectified for the fiscal year 23, not necessarily ongoing to the future until the next full session.
Thank you for that uplifting information.
There's more questions to be asked about that, but I don't know I can go down that rabbit trail right now. Unfortunately, if this is not rectified long-term, it's good that we have hope for this year. But if the legislature does not choose to provide a long-term solution, then we could see Deer Valley's budget for the following year be $46 million plus shorter than it is.
Correct.
And even if they fix it for this year.
President O'Brien, that is correct. Okay. And I think another statement regarding the aggregate expenditure limit that we've not said before, but that certainly is true, is that even if the legislature did not vote to override the aggregate expenditure limit, it is no savings of money at the state level because these are funds that are already allocated and provided to school districts. We would just be holding on to them until we have the ability to spend them in the future. But it's no savings for the state.
So the money doesn't go back to the state. It just sits there because they were allocated through the budget year, until they actually give us further authorization on top of the authorization that came with the approval of a budget from the Republican legislature and signed by Governor Ducey without the authority to spend it. Wonderful. I appreciate that additional information, Mrs. Ordway.
I have just one more comment. Do you think we'll get interest on that?
I'm going to
I mean,
assume that is
monetary interest,
a rhetorical.
Dr.
not
Finch is
philosophical interest.
Is DVA interested? Got a lot of interested people.
Okay.
That was snarky, and I don't apologize.
No apology necessary. All right, we are going to move on to Dr. Smith's report on the state accountability letter grades.
Thank you, President O'Brien, members of the governing board, Dr. Finch. It's my pleasure to give a brief report on state letter grades. This is fairly fresh information. They were first became public on November 1st. They were in a 2-week appeal window, but we have the letter grades for all our schools. I'll give you quickly an overview of the basic structure. And it's been a while since we've had to think state letter grades, but basically you can see for K-8 schools or 3-8 schools, there's proficiency growth, how English language learners are performing, and these things called acceleration and readiness points, which include stuff like chronic absenteeism, some of our subgroup performance, special ed inclusion, et cetera. And for high schools, then you also add in graduation rate and college and career readiness indicators. And then you can also see in the bottom here, there is ability to get bonus points for both 3-8 schools and for the high schools, or up to 8 bonus points at a high school if you got all of them. This is the exact same thing, but in a picture view, so you can, and some people might find this easier to look at, but you can see it does really show you that growth is very heavily weighted for K-8, and then proficiency, and then the 2 smaller parts. I'm going to show you some information that's not really fresh. So this has been out for a while. These are the one component and a main component of the state letter grades. These are the passing rates for our schools in Deer Valley Unified School District. These are the ELA results, and I'll just give you 5 seconds to find your school that you love the most. And you can also check the overall district ELA rates are 57% compared to the state average of 40.3%. Same type of information, but this time for math. And again, you can see 51% overall for the district and 33.3% for the state. Now, these are AASA results, so they're just for grades 3 through 8. There are different types of results for high school, and I'm explaining this a little bit. These are the ACT results, actually for both math and ELA. The title just says math, but you see columns there for math and ELA. The passing rate in the top matrix or the top table for math is right in the middle there. You can see the pass rate by school overall for the district, 44%. And then on the far right, you can see the pass rate for ELA overall for the district, 50%. I think the bottom chart is maybe a little more interesting, although the pass rates are important for the letter grades. The bottom shows you what the actual scale score was for each of the topics on the ACT test. So you see the composite score, and then you see math and science. Math and science are rolled up into a STEM composite score, and then you see English, reading, and writing, which are rolled up to an ELA composite score. And here you can also see how we performed relative to the state. So now what we really came here for was to see the state letter grades. It's a very similar chart as the proficiency, but now with the actual letter grades on here. And once again, you can scan through here. I'll pause just a second so you can find your schools. Everybody in the audience can find their school and see their school's letter grade, although I know you already know it. And now I'm going to just do some highlights of those letter grades. If you would have done some quick calculations on that last chart, you would have seen that 92% of our schools have an A or B letter grade. That's 25 A's and 11 B's. Highest proficiency points in the district was Sierra Verde with 27.8. That's 27.8 out of 30 possible points. And we had 9 other schools, so a total of 10 schools, getting 25 or more of those proficiency points. So there's a shout out to Sierra Verde and actually to all those schools. Highest growth points, the Traditional Academy at Bel Air, 48.7 out of 50 possible growth points. That's impressive. But there were some others at the 48 level also. Shout outs to Las Brisas, Norterra Canyon, and Copper Creek. And the highest total points possible out of 100, again, the Traditional Academy at Bel Air with 98.9, which is amazing, and Las Brisas with 98.5. 2 more highlights I want to show you, but first I need a drum roll from Dr. Zierbach. Oh, never mind. I messed up. All 5 high schools improved their proficiency points. That is cool. That is amazing. Now, drum roll. Mountain Shadows and New River moved from a C in fiscal year 19 to an A in fiscal year 22. And now I want to remind you that our Aspire online learning school is a K-12 school. So they actually get graded on a hybrid model. So they have to use both the K-8 model and the high school model, and then both of those points are weighted depending on how many kids they have, students they have, in the K-8 grades and the high school. So now I need a little drum roll from Dr. Galligan. This is a chart of all the online schools I could find in the hybrid model that in the state's public file. And it's sorted from the highest total percentage earned points to the lowest. You can see Aspire is one of 4 Bs in the state in this hybrid model for online schools, and the highest total percentage earned of their points. I'm going to let Gary take a picture of that. And thank you very much. I'll take any questions if you have them.
Okay. I have one question on the second slide about graduation rates for our high schools. And can you explain how that grade is assigned, or how that portion of it is assigned?
President O'Brien, yes, I can. There's a total of 20 points there available, 10 for your graduation rate and 10 for your graduation rate improvement. You see there's a 4, 5, 6, and 7-year graduation rate there. So the 10 points for the graduation rate goes like this. They take your 4-year graduation rate and multiply it times 5. So if you've got 100% graduation, you get 5 points. Then they take your 5-year graduation rate and multiply it times 4. Your 6-year, multiply it times 3. And your 7-year, multiply it by 2. And then they add all those up. And if you could possibly get more than 10 points, they cap it at 10. So that's why you see 4, 5, 6, and 7-year graduation rates. The graduation improvement, if you're above 90 in your 4-year rate, you automatically get those points. If you're below 90 and you improve by at least 2 percentage points, you get a very similar structure, you get points. If you don't improve, you don't get the points.
So if I'm a high school that is above 90% graduation rate for the year, I get all 10 points.
You get 10 points for the improvement.
For the improvement part.
Yeah.
If I'm below 90% and I improve by 2%.
By 2% or more.
2% or more, thank you, I get all 10 points?
You get 10 points. If you improve, if you're between 2 percentage points, if you improve 2 percentage points or go down less than 2 percentage points, you get 5 points. If you go down more than 2 percentage points, you get 0 points.
So the part about how we determine the 90%, how many of our students graduated, how is that determined? How do we determine that I had 95% of my kids graduate or I had 75% of my kids graduate?
That's all based on, from the state's perspective, what Power School feeds the state. So they know the kids we had, they know the kids that have withdrawn. And if they've withdrawn with certain withdrawal codes, we still own them. If they withdraw and say they're going somewhere else, we own them until somewhere else owns them. And so they would be kids that did not graduate from us if they don't go somewhere else and ask for a transcript, and now that other school claims them.
So if I withdraw my children from their high school and I move to wherever, Alaska, and I decide to homeschool and I don't ever pull their transcripts,
Right.
our high school still owns them.
President O'Brien, I believe that that is true. And so one thing that we have started looking at is, do we need to have a process for our high schools to keep track of those kids and put in, and fix their withdrawal code with the state once we know where they are and what they're doing. And to be honest with you, I don't know exactly what that process is going to look like, but it's on our radar screen, especially for our Aspire online learning school and for Barry Goldwater and Deer Valley High School.
And is there a way to have that in, like if a parent knows they're going to go to whatever, ABC high school, wherever they're going, can they tell us that then? Or is it only until the high school or the school they go to requests their transcripts?
President O'Brien, to tell you the truth, I'm not exactly sure. I don't think we can just tell that then.
Okay.
But I'm not sure what the next step in the process looks like. That's the research we need to do.
So it's interesting to me that a parent has pulled their child out there and we would be responsible for that child until the parent enrolls them in another school, right? The parent is responsible for the child. The parent gets to choose where they go to school, yet we would be docked if that parent chooses not to enroll them somewhere else. Okay, thank you.
Dr. Zierbach, do you want to be better information?
I appreciate it. Thank you. Mrs. Ordway?
I was just going to concur with you because we do have kids that leave, and we just don't know where they are. And that's from freshmen all the way through their senior year, correct?
Board Member Ordway, President O'Brien, that's all the way through 7 years after that, if you want to talk about 7-year graduation rates.
Did they, I think you shared that was the missing link at Deer Valley High School and Barry Goldwater. They both would have been A's this year, correct?
Yes, sir.
Would be, I hope that you'll bring back what you find and what process, if there's any we can put in place, or if there's something in the system that maybe we need to advocate be corrected or amended in the future. So, I mean, it's not just obviously a Deer Valley problem. It would be a problem for all the high schools in our state. And so certainly that should be something that looked at. So look forward to hearing more about that. Thank you. Oh, Mrs. Reed.
If you can go back to the slide with the state assessment results with the percentages of the pass rates. I don't know if there's anything else that you might want to add, or Dr. Galligan or Dr. Zierbach to provide value with the results, because I think sometimes when we get data like this, it can be interpreted in different ways. And somebody might interpret this in a way that would say that we are passing students that don't deserve to be passed from one grade to the next, or that shouldn't be graduated because they haven't learned the things that they were supposed to learn. So if you want to, I don't know, provide some context, I think that might be helpful for parents who might be listening in, or community members. I know that sometimes the news media likes to extract different data points and use them for stories. So I think that might be helpful, at least for me.
Well, you could talk a little bit about how the state sets the cut score. It's not a pass concept, but the pass is always used as the code word because people understand it. So maybe you could talk a little bit about that.
Yes. So President O'Brien, Ms. Reed, the cut scores really, and they haven't changed a whole lot since fiscal year 19. They changed for high school, But in general, those as the state Board of Education looks at the distribution of scores, they're going to look to have a distribution of results also, right? So they want to see, they don't want to see, it's almost like a curve, right? So if you're going to go for that distribution of results, you're going to definitely have kids that fall in the minimally proficient category, partially proficient, et cetera. And the result of that is a state average of 40.3 that are proficient or highly proficient. I haven't watched them actually set those cuts, but you can see based on the distribution across the whole state that there's definitely a curve to that process. I don't know if Dr. Galligan, you want to add anything to?
Just a reminder that the AASA assessment, the Arizona Science Assessment, is one data point on a single day. We work towards that, obviously, all of our schools and classrooms and our teachers, and you just celebrated teachers who had the highest growth scores, but there are two points that are shared with us with the state, and one is proficiency, which is the pass rate, and one is growth. And if we don't understand that there is a positive for both of those, that proficiency is where obviously we want all kids to be, but we also want kids to show a year's growth every single year, as close to that as possible. And these results right here don't necessarily show all of the data that we receive about how a child does or how a school does or how a teacher does, and all of that is compiled with Dr. Smith and Mary Beth Highland, and then it's shared with our schools, who then share out the news with our families. So again, each of these is something that's very, very important. We get our school labels, but there is so much more complexity to student learning and what goes on in our classrooms and in our schools that is not showcased in these numbers. But don't get me wrong, these numbers are very, very important. And I agree, Ms. Reed, that we need to explain the difference between proficiency and growth and celebrate both for our campuses.
Thank you.
I would, if there are additional data points that are shared out with families, so you share the results with the school, the principal then shares out a bigger picture for families to understand what's going on, not just with their student, I would guess, but maybe potentially with their kids, their school, sorry, that maybe we could have an example come to the school board so that it can be shared with our community. Because I think Mrs. Reed is right in that, well, I shouldn't say, I mean, I'm going to infer where I think she was additionally going with this, is that if I'm a community member without a kid in a school and I don't know much about what's been going on in education, and I look at these scores, this is problematic. And as she said, and I do wholeheartedly agree, the media twists this often. So I would love to see more information about that. Mrs. Fisher, do you have any questions about this report?
Actually, I just have a comment. I have not yet downloaded this to add to my file. I do a year-over-year comparison, and I have for the last, as long as I have history. But I will tell you, I have had community members contact me and ask about how they can get a year-over-year comparison and a long-term comparison so that they can see some of the growth and some of the things. So our parents are aware of how this works. A lot of them are. But our community members are because we do celebrate all the good, they want us to also be identifying where the concerns are. And so our community is looking at this data, and they are looking at it not just in the scores, the final end score, but they are looking for that growth, and they are looking for a year-over-year growth. So if there's any problem with how it is being calculated now versus a prior year, that may be something the district wants to look at. I will look at it when I analyze the data also.
President O'Brien, Ms. Fisher, just a quick caveat on that. Be careful comparing proficiency rates year over year. This is the first year we taken the AASA assessment. We did take AZM2 last year. We didn't take anything the year before, and then we took AZ Merit before that. So assessments have changed. However, we're calculating growth somehow, right? So the growth model used for in this environment is a relative sort of growth model. I've explained it often before, but you remember students are put into what they're called academic peer groups based on the previous year's assessment. And then they look to see how the students did on this year's assessment within that academic peer group. By definition, there are kids at the 99th percentile all the way down to the first percentile, and that's how they calculate that student learning growth. So it's not calculating how did my learning grow based on the assessment results, it's how did I grow relative to my other students in that academic peer group.
Correct. So that's one measure. But even though the test has changed, and it's changed multiple times over the years, we are still testing for some of the same basics that our students should know. And so it does at least give us a reasonable picture of the overall district. And I just so you're aware, that is what parents are looking at this time, at least the ones that have contacted me.
Okay, thank you, Mrs. Fisher. And I would, additionally, it would be good to also understand, like, what are we doing? I'm looking at Deer Valley Middle School's math results. So what do we do for a school like that? So if we could find that out as well, I would appreciate it. Thank you. All right, we have a call to the public now.
Yes. The board invites public comments on the district's business in general and on any agenda item in specific. All speakers must observe the rules of decorum. Speakers must fill out a card listing name, address, and topic and hand it to the board president prior to the president calling the meeting order. Excuse me. All speakers must make their comments in no more than 3 minutes, if necessary, to accommodate all speakers within the 30-minute time limit. The president may shorten each speaker's time. Constructive criticism is in order. Rudeness, vulgarity, disruptive conduct, and or remarks that disrespect personal dignity are not in order and will not be allowed. Under the Arizona Open Meeting Law, the governing board cannot discuss or act on any items that are not listed on the agenda. Board members may respond to criticism made by a speaker, ask staff to review a matter, or ask that a matter be put on a future agenda. And we have one public speaker, and that would be Paul Vogler. Did I say that right?
Please step to the microphone over there, and the one over there in the corner.
There's a lot of them around, but
Sorry,
that's yours.
that's the one.
There's
Then
two over there, pick.
pick your, that's good. If you state your name for the record, then your time will begin.
Yeah, my name is Paul Vogler. I have two boys that go to the Canyon Spring.
Can you step a little bit closer to the mic? Thank you.
Is that better? Okay. My name is Paul Vogler. I have two boys that go to the Canyon Springs STEM Academy. And really the point of my statement is to just provide recognition to two Deer Valley employees. And that was April Farley, the principal there, and Scott Warner. Far too often people come here to complain. And I thought I had an issue that was frustrating. And those two employees, they took ownership, and that was appreciated. You know, they realized I was frustrated and I was trying to get to the bottom of it. And yeah, they really did. April listened, and she responded and helped me out where she could. And Scott was able to close and address my complaint. So congratulations to two of them, and simply thank you. So that's it.
Thank you so much for your comments this evening, and we do appreciate hearing good news.
Thank you.
Can I say wow? Am I correct? Yes. We're moving on to
Consent
agenda. I would ask that we approve consent agenda items 5A through M, leaving B for a separate consideration.
I second.
We have a motion and a second. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed, please say nay. Hearing none, the motion passes unanimously.
Did you hear
Ms.
Mrs. Fisher?
O'Brien, was that just on 5A?
I'm sorry, can you say that again?
Was that just for 5A, or is that for the
No, that was for
second?
5A through M, excluding 5B. Excluding
Okay.
5B for separate consideration.
Okay, thank you.
Did you vote aye?
I did.
Okay, thank you, ma'am. Okay.
All right, so I will make a motion. Hold on a second. I'm going. Okay, I'll make a motion that the governing board approve board policy JLCB immunizations of students.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. I actually had some questions on this. Unfortunately, both the people that could answer them are unavailable this evening. So I'm going to move to continue this item until, is the next meeting going to be okay? To the November 29th meeting. Do I have a second?
Second.
I have a motion and second to continue item 5B until the 29th. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Whoop. Yes, okay. Any opposed? Hearing none, the motion passes unanimously, and I know that that was a change for Mrs. Taylor, so it might take a second before it comes up electronically. So we could just bear with us for...
Here it
okay.
is.
There it is. Thank you. Wonderful. Item 6A.
I would ask that the governing board approve the employee professional development out of state.
I second.
Any questions or discussion?
No.
Hearing none, all those in favor, please say aye.
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 Any opposed, please say nay. Hearing none, the motion passes unanimously. And we're just waiting for our computers to catch up with us. Mrs. Taylor can register the votes that were stated vocally.
Oh, and here we go.
Oh, there we go. Item 6B.
Would ask that the governing board approve addenda pre-approvals.
I second.
Any questions or discussion?
No.
I have one.
Yes, Mrs. Fisher?
Just want to double check with Heather. The one that is for the cheerleading coach, do we have full documentation that this is a student desired and led purchase?
Mrs. Fisher, members of the board, yes, that is a requirement for any of our student activities purchases, and including anything that would be on the board agenda. I can double check and follow up in the board update as well.
All right. Considering the position, I'll because of the history of the position, I will go ahead and vote A for it. Thank you.
What did she say? Sorry. You're just voting nay. Okay.
No, not nay. A. Yes.
Oh, A, aye. Okay, thank you.
Because that position is just, it doesn't matter. I'll
Okay.
vote yes for it.
I apologize for mishearing you.
It's probably me.
All those in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed say nay. Hearing none, the motion passes unanimously. So now we move on to our preview items. Our first preview item is Governing Board Policy KI, Visitors to Schools. And for that, we are going to Dr. Zurbach.
Okay, thank you, President O'Brien, members of the board, Dr. Finch. This is a preview of Policy KI. This has updated language about procedures that schools should have regarding visits for prospective parents. It also has language about face masks not being required. These are two items that we already do in our district. We have had an AMG on procedures for school visits since I have been here, and as you know, we have not required face masks for quite some time. So, as it states on the slide, when we come back, we would be recommending that this is approved.
Dr. Zurbach, real quick, the mask or face covering is not required. And there's language that says that they might be required for work safety, but it would be unrelated to COVID.
That is correct.
Can you give me an example potentially of that? And if not, could you provide us one in the Friday update, and we can follow up at the next meeting?
Example.
Okay, Mrs. Ordway.
They've got all different kind of science classes that you have to wear either safety face coverings, whether it be for your eyes or your mouth or your nose.
Yes, and in addition, there
using
would be
them for a
times, I
while.
believe, Mr. Merglino, from some of the construction folks that work, I know that there are times when they're on a campus that they may need to use some type of face covering. I don't know if you want to offer a specific for that, but I know I've seen that at times, even with our last campus, Inspiration Mountain.
Yeah, President O'Brien, specifically maybe for our nurses or other OSHA-required obligations that we would have for face covering. So it just allows us to make sure that that is not being contradictory to those requirements.
Okay. Any other questions or discussion? Okay, hearing none.
Ms. O'Brien,
Oh, yeah, sorry, Mrs. Fisher.
under the policy, I don't really care where they put it, but I would like it to say, when it references regulation, that the regulation be subject to board approval upon any changes, so that we're ensuring there's oversight.
That's true of all policy.
Sorry, hold on a second. Say that again, Mrs. Fisher, where it says,
I would like it to specifically say, where it says see regulation KIR parent, I would like it to say that the regulation is subject to board approval upon any changes.
so are you suggesting that the board would approve all regulations?
Well, we should, but we don't. But specifically this one, I don't want the parents being shut out. And then when they try to address it, the board says, well, we didn't know. I don't want that to be the case. I want there to be accountability, not only for the administration, but for the board, that they are aware of any changes, specifically related to separating them from their potential ability to go on campus.
Sorry, I was looking for, I thought I had that regulation pulled up from earlier, and now I've lost it. Was that KI?
Yeah, it's KIR. I'm not trying to add it to the regulation because the regulations don't go before the board. I was trying to ensure that the policy states that if there is any changes to KIR, they must be put before the board for approval before they go into effect.
So we have a KIRA and a KIRA, and we have a KIRB.
President O'Brien, we would bring, once this would be approved, we would then, through cabinet, have the regulation that would come through. As far as the regulation being approved by the board, I would defer to Dr. Finch. That is not the process that we use. So, again, I would defer to Dr. Finch on whether he would want that to occur or not.
Well, Thank you, Dr. Zerbeck. I appreciate that. Can you explain? But can you explain to me though, based on approving KI, irrelevant of Mrs. Fisher's request, it looks like if I read KIRB, that there would be, I'm trying to understand the difference between RA and RB and why we have two separate regulations.
Yep, President O'Brien, again, I believe, I can put this in the Friday update for you, but I believe there is updated language in KIR that they are suggesting as well. But again, we wouldn't bring that to cabinet until KI would have approval. So you would not see that right now in the existing RB.
I understand what you're saying, but can you tell me right now today what's the difference between, why do we have an A and a B right now?
Let me take a quick look, President O'Brien.
Looks like RB was related to COVID.
Yes, that is correct, President O'Brien. KIRB certainly was in response to COVID with the references to face coverings.
Okay.
So the one that she is referring to is B, the one related to COVID, correct?
No, she's at, Mrs. Fisher, you're asking that in the,
What I'm asking for is due to the sensitivity of this topic. I know that we don't generally see regulations when we give a blanket permission for the superintendent, any superintendent, to put regulations without oversight. The board never sees it. I'm requesting that in the case of this policy, because of the sensitive nature of the parent-child relationship, that we have it say that if there are changes to the regulation, that they come to the board for a basic approval before they're implemented.
yes, in KI, so in KI, sorry, I have too many screens open. My husband is always yelling at me about that. I got to flip back here to KI. So the new KI says, or the first reading tonight, the superintendent shall establish school visit procedures for control of persons other than the school personnel or students who enter district premises. If you go down to the second red paragraph, the second sentence says, see regulation K-R. And I believe what Mrs. Fisher is asking is that the sentence say, there be a sentence added that KIR must be approved by the governing board. Correct, Mrs. Fisher?
Correct.
Okay. Any discussion or further questions? Okay. All right. Next.
President O'Brien, Vice President Ordway. Policy IHAMB, Family Life Education, is an addition to instruction in sex education. Specifically, the addition is that schools shall not refer students to use any sexually explicit material in any manner unless it's part of an approved board sex education program. There is an exemption that materials can be exempted from that requirement if they meet the definition of ARS, and that is included in the regulation. And that regulation specifically just gives us 3 very direct things that we generally do already to identify if a material that is in use should not be used or meets this ARS definition. So this IHAMB is really just a small snippet of information added to sex education in schools.
Questions or comments? Mrs. Fisher?
Well, not at this time. I think this one needs more looking at, but not at this time. Thank you.
Policy JF, student admissions, there's an addition to this particular policy about a certificate of educational convenience, and it just discusses for a student who is not able to attend their home district by distance, transportation, parent or guardian employment, or other things that may occur, they would submit the certificate of educational convenience to receive, Jim, you'll have to help me here, to receive enrollment in that district. I'm pretty sure that's what it is. It's a very unique and very limited addition. It really would only impact students who may be in an unincorporated area, and Deer Valley has a very tiny, not at this moment developed unincorporated area, or when a student becomes a ward of the state. So in essence, this is just a change to this particular student admission policy for a certificate of educational convenience.
And so they go to the county superintendent, and is that who approves them?
President O'Brien, I am not certain, but I can find out, and I'll add that to the Friday update.
No, that would be us because they're applying to come here or applying to go there or applying wherever they're
Exactly.
going.
Either way.
So it lets the owner of the thing they're interested in that they want to come there or transfer there. A better question is what you might be thinking of is McKinney-Vento. That's a whole different game than this one. This is brought in by the state, so it would be approved by our district. In this case, superintendent.
However, as President O'Brien said, whenever we receive something, as is noted in red, we would send that completed application to the county school superintendent, but it would go first to our superintendent, Dr. Finch.
Okay, I guess I'm trying to understand, is there a possibility of denying this type of enrollment, or?
We can double check with our attorneys, but I believe it does have that possibility, and that would be the appeal process to the county superintendent.
Okay.
Doc-
Mrs. Ordway?
We are a piece of the puzzle, I believe. That's how it was explained to us, but we can double check and put it in the Friday update.
Do you know where this came from? Like the legislative? Okay, because I just need to be able to look it up to get context on, because there has to be an actual example that we could have. So I'll do some research on that.
And we'll add something to the Friday update.
Okay.
There's also in red on that same, it's 15825. So I would guess there's probably language there about it. Okay. Thank you so much for trying to help us through those. Governing board reports. Mrs. Fisher?
For health reasons, I'm going to pass tonight.
Okay. We hope you feel better. Mrs. Reed?
Sorry, I'm trying to pull my schedule back up so I can look back through all of the fun things that I got to do last week. So obviously it's been a month since our last meeting. Some of the highlights for me were attending the Veterans Day celebrations. I was able to go to Diamond Canyon and Paseo Hills. And I thought that one thing that one of the grandparents said to me was pretty profound. at Diamond Canyon, I went back into the media center after the ceremony to say thank you to the parents and grandparents who served and who came to support their students during the assembly. And one of the grandparents pulled me aside and talking to some of the other staff members and the assistant principal. And he just said thank you, and thank you for the service that our schools provide, that our teachers provide, and said that, in this world, politics is so divisive and we can disagree on so many different things. But at the base of it, he is so thankful because he's been overseas in various countries and served in the Middle East. And he's had a unique perspective and opportunity to see what education opportunities are like in different countries. And he said he's so thankful for the education that we are able to provide in the United States, and specifically in our school district for his grandkids. And he was almost brought to tears in remembering some of the things that he saw during times of war, and how we are so quick as a society to fight over these things that seem to be so significant at the time. When it comes down to it, we should just be really thankful for the privilege that we get to have, that kids get to go to school in a safe place, and that girls get to go to school and get to be educated and go to college. Because in some of the countries he saw, that wasn't an option. So I know that with the election cycle kind of being over in our state, that there are a lot of people who fall on both sides and a lot of people who fall in the middle. There's been a lot of disagreements around education, but I think that we can all agree that education is important, and we want our kids to be in schools that are thriving, and we want them to have all of the tools that are necessary to be successful in their future endeavors, and to grow up and to change the world and to make it a better place. And so it was just eye-opening to me that he chose to take that moment when the celebration was really about him and his service, and he brought it back to education. So just wanted to share that. And I hope that everybody enjoys their Thanksgiving break next week. There are so many things that we have to be thankful for. I know I'm thankful for my time of service here on the board. Thankful for all of our teachers and our administrators that pour so much of themselves into providing for their students, and thankful for the opportunity to be on campus and to interact with those kids and see all of the things that they're learning. So thank you.
Mrs. Ordway?
Let's see, I was not able to physically attend any of the Veterans Day meetings because my mom had this 90th birthday, so I went to see her. But I did get to watch Diamond Canyons live, so that was nice. One of the things that I consistently do hear from veterans from the Vietnam War, mostly because I happen to know quite a few of them, they first think that our youth is not as respectful or whatever negative things that there are, and then they go to the Veterans celebration and anthem. And we have our ROTC, and I think we have 6 schools that participate in it. And then they have Boulder Creek this year had students passing thank you cards out just to say thank you. So some very maybe one-sided thinkers have now come around to believe that the indoctrination that is out there is really indoctrinating them with patriotism and being able to say thank you. So that's my big thing. My second thing is we've got our food going strong. We have our Christmas Angels going on. So if you go on your Deer Valley Education Foundation website, you'll find a place to participate somehow, whether it's helping us deliver or sending money or just letting us know who needs something. So happy Thanksgiving prematurely, and enjoy whatever it is you do on Thanksgiving.
Thank you all. It has been a while since we've been here for a regular governing board meeting, and I have to go back and say congratulations to the Barry Goldwater High School drama group. They had a great play. I enjoyed that. Thank you, Boulder Creek High School, for your awesome homecoming parade. Got to catch a couple Deer Valley High School football games, and appreciate Dr. Finch giving us some time on the pop luncheon to talk to our parent organization leaders about some good things that we're doing with the food. And Angel Tree, Inspiration Mountains ribbon cutting was awesome. It was extraordinary, hashtag extraordinary. So everything from student speakers to I believe it was a parent who sang, and of course, Dr. Finch stole the show with his announcement, although he did let the student make the announcement, but that was fun. So that was a great job. And I have to
Wait a minute, what was the announcement?
You don't know the announcement?
I don't know if everyone knows.
I'm
the
not going to let
announcement.
him do it because he kept it a secret from the school board members. So I'm going to steal his thunder now that Inspiration Mountains 6th grade students get to go there for 7th and 8th grade next year. They will not have to leave Inspiration Mountain for 7th and 8th grade. So, yes.
And Jim has gray hair.
Jim has grayed substantially since I saw him last. Not really, but he probably gets a little less sleep than before. And kudos to Jim, because I know he always makes it happen. And there were a lot of happy kids and happy families about that announcement. And then my final shout out and thank you is to Marie Brennan and Deer Valley Education Foundation. I want to let folks know that last year, we were able to help about 40 to 50 families with food boxes for Thanksgiving. And I don't mean Thanksgiving dinner. I mean, we provide breakfast, lunch, and snacks, so they have food Monday through Friday while they're off school. And so this year when we put out the call, not only did that number nearly triple, but another school who had an agreement with an organization where they were getting Thanksgiving dinners for 125 families, that fell apart. And so they contacted Marie Brennan. And so she is, Deer Valley Education Foundation has stepped up and has helped us fill the need for what is nearly 250 families in our school district. So thank you, Marie, and to all the folks who support Deer Valley Education. Everything costs more, and I know times are tough, but we will have some kiddos, and I'm sure based on what happened with our food boxes, we will have even more than ever for our Angel Tree. So if you're able to, like Mrs. Ordway said, go to Deer Valley Education Foundation and make a donation for that cause. I know that our staff members across the district are so generous, and our community has been generous in years past, and I would just ask you to please continue that generosity. There are lots of families who won't have a Christmas without our assistance. So thank you all to all the wonderful people in our district and our community. And with that, I hope that I'm thankful for this community and to have been a part of it, to be a part of this school board, and I hope that everybody has a really incredibly thankful and blessed Thanksgiving. Dr. Finch.
It is celebration time for the different seasons that are closing. We have some announcements if you haven't picked them up on Twitter or Facebook or Instagram. And that is our football teams. O'Connor made the open and will be playing Liberty 2 Fridays from today, or from this Friday. Mountain Ridge will be playing, I think, Mountain Point, 7 p.m. on Friday. I think Boulder Creek is playing Queen Creek, if I'm correct. So 2 teams playing this Friday in the playoffs, and then the following Friday in the Open. So, and Goldwater just missed this year, so so close. We're working on that as well. They had a great record, but that bracket is really full, so they just missed. And and Deer Valley's young, and they'll be back next year. So very good representation of those. We had some swimmers that won. Our volleyball team, I think O'Connor went the furthest of our teams, the girls' teams. And the big announcement is on Saturday at the Abota State Championships for marching band. That start, I think Deer Valley starts at 9. You can get on the website. It's at the Glendale Community College, I believe. 9 or 9:30 is Deer Valley, and then all day long, our bands will be represented there. Goldwater is around noonish, I think, and O'Connor was around 3-ish. And I think Mountain Ridge is ranked number 1 and will be play last, I think, at 8:30-ish, somewhere around in there. Look at the website. And it's the GCC on Olive. And again, I hope to be there. I'll be there. Come out and support our bands. They all did a great job this year. And again, I think Miss O'Brien hit it as well. All our plays and bands and clubs and all those kinds of things are also finishing up their performance seasons for the fine arts. So congratulations to them. We also, it looks like, Stephanie Simonchek and Paul Carver will be our 2 new board members. That's getting close to closing. And they appear to be in the lead. And the next, I'm assuming, probably done today or tomorrow. But congratulations to those 2 folks to replace Ms. Reed and Ms. O'Brien. And last but not least, I want to reemphasize from Ms. Mock that we are continuing to work with our governor, try to get the AEL moving so we can get moving. And thanks to our NST team working together to get us a plan ASAP so we can be ready should they move forward. So again, I'll reemphasize also for a thankful break and a great holiday season. And congratulations to the schools for Deer Valley performing well on this one assessment, the AASA. 92% of our schools are A or B, and once again, we're leading the pack. That's what we do. We're extraordinary. Thanks.
Future meetings are posted, and I would call for a motion to adjourn at 8:08 p.m.
Second.
All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, please say nay. All right, motion passes unanimously. So can we go right into? Okay, then we will. I will call the special meeting of the governing board study session on Tuesday, November 5th, 2022 to order at 8:09 p.m. Let the roll call show that all members are present except Mrs. Paperman. Mrs. Fisher is here telephonically. You're staying on, right, Mrs. Fisher? Did I lose her? Mrs. Fisher?
She was scheduled to stay on, so unless she's not feeling well. I can check with the back there to see if she's still on.
Is she, well, okay.
He's going to try and call her again.
Okay, so she's not with it. So let the roll call reflect that Mrs. Reed, Mrs. Ordway, and Mrs. O'Brien are present right now. We're trying to get Mrs. Fisher on the line. Can we have a motion to adopt the agenda?
So moved.
That's me.
Mrs. Fisher?
Yeah, I'm here. I just couldn't get my phone to cooperate. It
No
wouldn't let me
problem.
pick you.
Okay, great. You're with us. We have a motion and a second to adopt the agenda. All those in favor, please say aye.
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 Any opposed? please say nay. Hearing none, the motion passes unanimously. And so we ran out of some time at our last study session, or at the study session, to talk about standard-based grading. So Dr. Galligan is with us, as well as some of our speakers. Dr. Galligan, I was trying to find the presentation that was given over the summertime. Was that our July 12th meeting?
President O'Brien, that would have been one, yes.
Okay. All right. Doctor, there was the end of the presentation we didn't really get to. Is there any material that you would like to cover or discuss towards the end of the material on the evidence-based?
I believe Kathy White is here. She and Jonathan Smith from O'Connor were going to be talking through that section. It really is, for that particular last part, it was to give updates on changes in Power School, changes in our K-8 report cards, and really the supports on the back end of both of those areas. Kathy?
Yes, President O'Brien, members of the board, Dr. Finch. We were just giving some updates on what had happened since July, really talking about adding all of the Arizona State standards to Power School so teachers could grade all of the standards that are associated with their courses, as well as we did a big push in response to our dual enrollment and advanced placement teachers. They really wanted their competencies also loaded. So we worked through all of those and worked through those standard sets, and were able to get all of those loaded as well. And I know they were very happy about that. We also had some specialty courses that we worked through the proper standard sets for those. They include things, some of the more unique classes like a Math 180 or leadership class that don't necessarily have Arizona State standards that are specifically outlined for them, but we of course aligned state standards to those course, the proper sets that would match for that. So we did all of that work really right through the first couple weeks of school and got those ready to go so teachers could be grading those for students. We also did a lot of trainings in that pre-service stage into the first few weeks of school. You can see we had trainings and we had videos that were created for teachers. We did some gradebook checkup sessions with district facilitators going out to the schools to help the educators get their gradebook set up properly, as well as train some gradebook coaches on each of the campuses as well. And then we did some training for administrators so they knew how to get into the gradebooks and look through those with their staff as well. We also had, we did sessions with our curriculum instruction assessment specialists, new teacher mentors, PLC coaches to make sure as they went out to support teachers, they had a lot of the information as well so that we wouldn't be contradicting each other. So everything had a consistent message. The clicker. We also did some updates to the report cards. Really specifically, in the younger grades, we updated the key because there was not the information about A, B, C, D, F in those keys, so we added that in there. And then removed percentages for the A through F listings and listed them as their titling piece to help make that not as confusing. This is just a little information in case you had heard that at one point early on, as we were uploading all these standards, somehow the citizenship standards disappeared for about a week or so. Well, we got that added back in, and I don't know if you heard about that, but you know, people were a little bit concerned about that, but that was rectified right away. We also cleaned up some of the standards on the report cards. In the past, when we first uploaded standards, I wasn't part of that push, but that was many years ago. It looked like some of the standards were uploaded as like a combination standard, I think to save space, but that becomes complicated because they're not really state standards. So we got those cleaned up, made sure they were true state standards. And this is for you all, just links to the updates to each of those report cards for K through 8. Moving forward, I'm not sure what that is, but moving forward, you can see at the bottom here, we're going to be working this month on the transcript. We just have to update the key a bit so that it matches what we are grading this year, so the key matches with the A through F piece. And the next part.
And
I'm
then,
not sure we have
Tricia,
this.
I don't know if you would come up and talk to this slide from the teachers in the multi-school collaborative team who were there that evening.
There we go. Good evening, President O'Brien, members of the board, Dr. Finch. I feel like I'm kind of stealing their thunder because they spent a lot of time putting this together. There are examples of what a holistic rubric looks like, and a holistic rubric is overall what a 1 through 4 or an A through F would look like in a classroom. And there are examples if you click on those links. An analytic rubric specifically looks at the standard and what a 1 through 4 or an A through F means for that standard. And those are all created during PLCs and during their work in the PLC. And then the grade book actually reflects the rubrics and the work from the PLC. And if you click on that, you'll be able to see how the standard and the learning progressions, I'm trying to remember, how the standard and the learning progressions translate into the grade book. And then the data protocol is something that the PLC looks at. And I think that Mrs. Carr had discussed that during her part of the presentation. But this is a math protocol for our 6th grade math team. And they wanted to kind of show how that also represents itself in the grade book.
President O'Brien, Ms. Ordway, members of the board, and that would have concluded the presentation at the last study session.
Mrs. Fisher, do you have any questions?
I just have one question that's been my main question is, I was under the impression that we had voted to not continue with standards-based grading, that we had requested that we return to traditional grading, even if we maintain the mindset for the purpose of how we're teaching, we were going to return. And it's the one vote I can think of in the last 2 years that 5 individuals voted for, and yet it has not been followed at all. Multiple teachers have said that it's been going full steam ahead with standards-based grading. I would like an explanation for why that is.
President O'Brien, Ms. Fisher, there were 2 areas that the board gave direction on in the July board meeting. One was that for the 16 schools that there would be a meaningful grade added to the grade book each week for each content area. As you saw in the study session, our schools are diligently working on that. They've identified both celebrations and challenges to that and have asked that our parents partner with us in the endeavor of ensuring that those meaningful grades are indeed uploaded into our grade books each week. That was the first direction. The second direction was to change the scale so that our scale was 60% a single number for an F, 61 to 69% for a D, 70 to 79% for a C, 80 to 89% for a B, and 90 to 100% for an A. The compression is still able to be done with the scale that we were given. And based on that scale, Power School was changed in a short period of time to ensure that what we were directed to implement with that scale was in place when the school year began. When we think about what traditional grading is a 0 to 100% scale, where 0 to 59% is a failing grade. And then you go up from there, 60 to 69 is a D, and so forth and so on. The board directed us to use this particular scale, 60 to 100%, and that is what we built on the back end of Power School.
Mrs. Fisher?
From everything that I have had brought forward to me from teachers, we have the teachers who are notably pro stat-based grading, solicited to come and give us the same presentations and send emails. However, there's a whole subset of teachers who are opposed, and they are coming with information showing how the percentage being scaled off is really skewing the grades incorrectly, how it is, the impact is very degrading to many students, and it's very specific to some students that there's really not that much need to put forth the effort because, well, they can't possibly get an F. And whether that's true or not, that's the perspective. And it's not just one teacher. I have had multiple teachers come forward with this, and I just want to be clear that it is still very problematic for our teachers. There are students who it is very problematic for, and I am highly concerned that we are just making it more work and more difficult by not just returning to our traditional methodology of grading. Our district is not ready for this, and our staff and our students are exhausted already, and this is just double and triple work. Even if we are using the standards-based mindset, there isn't any reason we couldn't use the systems we were before and still have those same methods. And that's what the teachers have shared with me, and that's what I came forward tonight to share. And it's not just the new schools. Some of it is the schools who have been in standards-based grading for quite some time. And those teachers have shared especially how the system is not taking to the changes that were made. So they were very mindful to send me screenshots, redacting out any private information, but showing how easy it is for that rounding error to extremely skew the grade. So that's what I wanted to bring forward. And I wanted to bring forward that it is still a major concern, and for our parents as well. Thank you.
Mrs. Ordway?
This would go to the principals here. Does it, when you are looking at your results from your standard-based grading, standard-based learning, are you finding that students are getting an easy pass? do you have any information or examples that could explain that? The emails that I get from the teachers are saying that it's opposite of that, that it's more difficult to get a great grade on something that they actually don't understand. So I'm just asking you guys because you're in the trenches. And just to, because we've got high school and we've got elementary school, so feel free to jump in.
President O'Brien, Governing Board Member Ordway, what I can tell you is like what the distribution that we shared at the last presentation, that there was not a large difference with that. What I can tell you is I've heard some of those comments, what you were sharing with some of the compression. You ask if there's evidence. The data that we've had doesn't show that evidence. The data we showed with the scholarships and all of that does not show that. I do think with the actions that were taken at the July 12th board meeting, probably had some sort of those compressions. I do think the difference with the standards-based mindset is also training our students. The one comment I heard was that, students don't try, and I'm paraphrasing what Board Member Fisher said, but that I do hear that sometimes, but that's another piece I think we as administrators and teachers continue to work with to have our kids realize that we are grading what they've learned, the demonstration they're learning, not always their effort. So that's what I can tell you at this point.
President O'Brien, Mrs. Ordway, our students simply don't have the option to not show us that they're working. With our learning progressions, every student needs to show us that they are mastering that progression in order to master that standard. And if they aren't, they get pulled into a small group. And our intervention process actually makes our teachers address those specific skills and needs for each individual student. So it is not an option to not do the work. So we aren't seeing students not do the work because they have to do the work. They have to show us that they know it. Does that answer?
So the homework piece that that is talked about a lot. I know from my personal experience, I had one that didn't have to do homework for one thing and used her time to do it for what she needed to do it, yet that not turning it in reflected poorly, even though she aced her stuff. So I'm just trying to understand, are we using homework as practice, or are we, I just need to understand it because I know it's quite different from what you hear, and I hear that if you take away the homework grade that would go into a final grade, then you're taking my leverage away. I mean, there's all sorts of stuff I hear. So if you could explain it.
President O'Brien, Mrs. Ordway, homework needs to be practice. It is not a measure. We don't measure what they do at home. We measure what they do at school. What we do, and even in the 7th and 8th grade, and 6th, 5th, and it was a shift because for some reason as students get older, we stopped doing small group instruction and we stopped doing rotations. But we went back to that in our 5th, 6th, 7th, and 8th grades. And we've built in response to intervention or MTSS time into every single core class. So at the end of every class, students are practicing in class. They are getting pulled for small group with skills based on their reflections on how they're doing on that skill and how the teacher is noticing that they're doing on that skill. So there's no
excuse for the students not to do their work because they have to do their work. And the teachers need to follow up on it, making sure that they do their work because we're looking at each standard and each student.
Let me try that again. President O'Brien, members of the board, there are definitely statements that we can respond to. When we look at motivation in our schools, I think there are a lot of things that have changed post-COVID. And our needs are great in our classrooms. There's no evidence that we have at our school that standards-based grading is the cause of the lack of motivation or that it has taken power away from teachers. I heard that word, taking power out of the hands. If we don't have everything done the way we used to with grading, the emphasis with our kids more than ever before, though, is about the students really understanding what their growth, the skills, the development that they see over time. And it's done in an encouraging way where students want to learn more. That growth mindset focus really takes place. So the grade book needs to improve like it always has. As we go back in time even, what do those grades mean from room to room? And I would say we're tighter than ever before with students and teachers, and for any of us working to hold parent meetings, we're able to better explain grades because we're on the same page with expectations, and the rubrics and the grades tying back into those rubrics is stronger than it's ever been. So we definitely have progress to make, and especially with so many new people to education, 30 new teachers to my campus, means that we've got constant work to do with what's the most important focus. And the standards-based grading has taken us to the next level in being able to really train teachers and help the classrooms have that clarity.
Well, look at me go. So with the specifics that the students need to work on, because now you know what the specifics are as opposed to, oh, you got a 90, I'm not really quite sure what you have to work on. You have your PLC meetings. Now, does 8th grade and 9th grade ever have any kind of discussions to see if this is strengthening skills? So when the 8th graders get into 9th grade, the 9th grade teachers aren't teaching 6th, 7th, and 8th grade like they normally do? I'm just wondering if that would be an effect, a positive effect.
Mrs. O'Brien, President O'Brien, Ms. Ordway, that would be fantastic. We just haven't been able to do that. We've worked really closely in our multi-school teams, but we haven't gone beyond our 8th grade with 9th grade. That would be a fantastic idea.
President O'Brien, Ms. Ordway, what Ms. Graham said is true. We try to do that vertical articulation. I have certain teachers that are wanting to do that, and we try to give them release days when possible, but I cannot tell you that has happened yet. As a unified district, that's something we can continue to move towards. There are some alignments, closer alignments, just because we're a unified district from where our 8th graders leave off in their curriculum to where they come into Algebra 1, 2 honors or Geometry honors, wherever that is. So there is that alignment. It's just not as concise. But as Dr. Stalk said, we are tighter than we've ever been. Dr. Chunas has worked with a group of our teachers across the district to make sure across the levels that they are tighter. And I would assume down the road, once we can continue to improve, that we could do that vertical alignment. Because to me, if we can start working in the 4th grade in having to see where those kids want to project as math, then we can get to that higher level math. And, but that does take some time for us.
I wasn't like accusing anybody of not doing it. I was just making an observation that with the way this is being taught and measured, that it might make it better for a student when they enter every different grade, but certainly high school. Dr. Tunis.
President O'Brien, Ms. Ordway, we did start our articulation horizontally and vertically at the high school level with ELA and math. And I know we presented that to you last time, where we're working on common rubrics for the essential standards. These teams were able to create quite a few, if not all of the essential standards. One of the grade levels, ELA 3-4, requested to come back a day so that they could finish because they found value in the work. So we took that work to our 7-12 level meeting and presented it to the principals, the feedback from the teachers, as well as the rubrics that were created. And the middle school principals wanted us to continue that work with middle school. So to your point, Ms. Ordway, yes, that is a logical next step, that because now we have rubrics that are aligned to the essential standards that are broken down by learning progressions for 9-11, and we're going to add 12th grade. Now we'll also go backwards, starting with 8th grade and 7th grade for ELA and math. And we're expanding to social studies and science as well. It just takes a little bit of time. But those are the types of things that this work is pushing us towards, which is more uniformity and more consistency and grading across not only at one school, but across all of our schools and all of our grade levels.
Dr. Tunis, when you talk about that 7-12 meeting where you discussed this and teachers, principals were excited and wanted to carry it to the other grades, is that all schools or is that just the schools that are doing standard-based grading?
President O'Brien, that was we started at high school. So it's all of the high schools, which they are not all involved in standards-based grading. But they are all involved in using the rubrics, and all of the rubrics will be placed into Canvas so that all teachers at all of their campuses, not just those who attended the meetings, can use those when they're assigning grades to students. Now, the easiest way to assign a grade to a student would be to tell them that they're proficient, minimally proficient, highly proficient, which is difficult to do in a traditional-based system. If you have a range of grades, proficiency all of a sudden becomes 80 to 89 versus you're proficient. So that, Ms. Graham can maybe talk about that a little bit more. That is something that does, when you've asked in the past how it's different, that is something that does come up if we were to go in that direction.
Okay, so our schools who are not standard-based grading, though, use the rubrics because it goes into power schools.
Correct.
And those skills are listed out there so every student, whether I'm at Sandra Day O'Connor or I'm at Boulder Creek, right? Because Boulder Creek is not one of our high schools. So if I'm in Algebra 1-2 and I'm at either one of those schools, I'm still learning the same skills. And those skills are in my power schools. So show up in my report card. My mom or my dad or my guardian, whomever, can go see that I'm struggling with equations, right? Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay. Mrs. Graham, so now help me better understand, or all of us, hopefully, what is the difference between getting a 1, 2, 3, 4 in there versus 60 through 100?
President O'Brien, board members, Dr. Finch, the standards-based grading separates each item on a test by the actual standard, and a separate grade is given for each standard based on the rubric for that standard, based on that analytic rubric for that standard. We do not average them together. We look at each standard separately. So when you're looking at a general test for a classroom that is not standards-based grading, in the traditional way, a test may have 20 different items on it. It may address 7 different standards, and you mark them correct or incorrect, and then you average them and they get a percentage. It doesn't look at the specific items and the specific standards on that test.
So if this test does, so I understand the difference between the way I took a math test and the way our folks at O'Connor and Barry Goldwater are taking a test, right? My question is going to be related to a specific standard or skill. You're not going to combine 5 different standards or 5 different skills in one question anymore. Unlike it might have been like that for those of us sitting up here, and you all too. Correct? Okay. But could Boulder Creek be writing their tests or giving their tests like you all are, so that you're just testing a question tests a skill or a standard? Is that possible?
President O'Brien.
I don't know who to look at. Thank you, Dr.
I know.
Timmons. So somebody talk. I'm like looking.
Yes, they could give a test on one standard, and they could tag the standard, but if they tag the standard, then they are choosing to assign it the one grade, right? So if it's a B, it'd be an 89%. If it's an A, it would be a 99%. The difference is in mixing the systems is if you were to say that a student was proficient, but you can choose your point range, then we're becoming more inconsistent, because I could say proficient for this child is 85, Kathy could say it's 82, Gail could say it's 89. So that's part of your question, not all of your question. Did I answer it?
I think we're getting there. I'm
Keep going.
still a little gray there. Dr. Stokes.
If I may offer an example perhaps from our campus, as there was mentioned that we've been doing standards-based grading for a lot of years. Sometimes what I see, though, is although we've been doing it on campus, the grade books looked different prior to this move. And I equate it sometimes to like a student who speaks Farsi is speaking English in our classroom, but they're constantly going back in their brain to what is that in Farsi and what is that in English. In our classrooms, a lot of that was happening where they're going back with the grading and they're giving a different message than the standards-based teaching that we're doing. And that's where this move for us, although not easy, even for those of us that have been on our campus that have been doing it for a while, it finally made us make it consistent with the conversations. The other thing I saw, and we were at Deer Valley Middle School today, which is my largest feeder school, and for the first time in a long time, we'll be able to have conversations about the progress that students made using the same language and the same rubric breakdowns very soon, so that we can continue learning that they started with in their classrooms. We can continue it. At the high school level, English 1, 2, and 3, 4 are the same standards. We can have conversations where those teachers can pass kids on to the 3, 4 teachers with very good information. And we have student by student, need by need. I was actually looking at that back here and was really excited to see what our teachers can pass on to the other teachers. What we used to pass on was a portfolio that said, here's my essay there that I wrote when I was a 9th grader, and here's what my teacher can see that I used to write like, but we weren't using apples and apples to have those conversations. So without the grading piece, we can be using the rubrics and we can be having conversations about learning targets and success criteria, but it didn't take us to the quality that we're beginning to have now with those conversations and to the depth that we can pass on that's focused really not just on our teachers understanding what the students know, but the students being able to communicate it more clearly. So I just kind of wanted to share that, our journey went to the next level, even though Power Schools has not been an easy program for us to work with in the short period of time that we tried to make the change. I think the grade book, the software itself has been the biggest frustration for our campus because we had just a really quick turnaround to try to make everything happen. Thank you.
Mrs. Graham, how long has your school been doing standard-based grading?
President O'Brien, this is our second year.
Okay. Mrs. Reed?
Okay, I've got a couple of questions. Paula, you had talked about the rubrics. What's the timetable to have them completed by for the different courses and grades? I mean, I know that it's a intensive process, but I'm just curious, since we're getting ready, potentially to add the other high schools and whatnot.
President O'Brien, Ms. Reed, for ELA, for freshman, sophomore, junior year, and for math, for ELA, I know for sure, we should have them done by the end of January this school year. And that's all of the essential standards. For math, we've only met 2 days, so I need to circle back to them and see their progress, but they were able to accomplish quite a lot in those 2 days as well. So by the end of this year for those grade levels, and then in the spring, we'll start with middle school for ELA and math. And that is as far as we are right now. We're also doing social studies in the spring.
And can you remind me who gets chosen to be a part of making the rubrics?
So we sent out to all of the high school principals and the AP curriculums to choose one person from each school per content level. And so they could probably answer better. We usually suggest the PLC lead, but that's not always the right perfect person for the job. So I don't know if Dr. Miller or Ms. Stolch.
Yeah, sometimes they were the LLT leaders or the PLC leaders. Sometimes it might have been the department chair. Really, we put it out to ask in ours who wanted to do that, and then went from there.
Yeah, and to just to add to the process, it's not as if the schools don't already have rubrics. They do. They all brought rubrics to the table. The point of our coming together was to have a unified system for unwrapping our standards using teacher clarity, which really was done at the K-8 level because the high school were all doing Project Momentum, so it was slightly different. So first we clarified our unwrapped standards, and they came to agreement because they were missing some of the learning progressions. They had them unwrapped fairly largely, which makes it a little bit more difficult to reteach when you don't break the skills down. But they had rubrics, and so the second part of it was for them to compare what they had and to come to a common understanding so that across our high schools, we're using the same language.
Where did those rubrics come from? Excuse me, Mrs. Reed, sorry.
Well, they start from the state, the performance level descriptors. So, I mean, there's a rubric for our main content areas. I don't want to say K, 312, and 412. And then we, as a district, have created them starting K3. So they already had a base. They already had a rubric for the standard. The work that we did was break the standard down into learning progressions, smaller chunks, because that's really how we want to be assessing kids so that we can reteach them. And the teams did those together.
So the state has rubrics that are based on the standards, but then what you're saying is the reason our teachers need to create additional rubrics is to get into the skill level? Is that correct?
Yes. Mm-hmm. They break down that main standard, yes, absolutely, into learning progressions, which is like a backwards design. If it's a meaty standard, you could teach one learning progression for a week. You could maybe teach one for a couple of days. It depends, so that they can informally assess students and reteach them during this RTI time that we've been provided in our schedules that we've built into our schedules.
Go ahead. So one of my large concerns with standards-based grading is the time that it takes to do that, because it's a commitment. And when I was at North Terra Canyon and observed the teachers doing that and participated in it, there's a lot of discussion. And so, it was something that I shared, I don't even know how long ago, when we were discussing all of this, is that coming off of of COVID and exhaustion and trying to, the learning deficits that our students had and everything else that, has happened over the last 3 years, changing a system and moving towards this, I didn't want it to be burdensome or cumbersome for our teachers, because, this is quite a change, and just changing and wrapping your head around what's going on is a lot of energy in and of itself, right? So I think it would be helpful, at least for me, if y'all kind of dreamed a little bit of what would it look like and how much time would it take to get all of this done, and what's the plan of having rubrics, the common rubrics done. So we could have a better idea of the time commitment that it would take to get everybody on the same page with that part being done. Does that make sense?
President O'Brien, Ms. Reed, yes. I'm going to say a little bit. It's a little bit of a catch-22 though, because right now our teachers are grading without rubrics, right? And we're assigning grades without rubrics. The work that we're doing now as we're creating rubrics, as we're breaking down standards, it's work. What we find and what you'll see in any research is you have to do the work yourself to some degree to want to use the work. So like I said, the performance levels descriptors, rubrics already exist in most of the content areas for our teachers, already there. They don't have to create them. The beauty of understanding the standards comes in like the time that you saw at Norterra Canyon, where the teachers come together, the time that our team spent with ELA and the math teachers. If you can flip to the comments, some of the comments that it takes time. So I don't know if there's an end destination in teaching, because you're always looking at your work, right? Like when I was teaching, I'm still teaching. I feel like I'm never done planning. I'm always going to be planning and talking about it. Part of the day when those teachers get together, those multi-school teams in your case it was Norterra Canyon, they're not just writing rubrics. They're writing rubrics, they're creating assessments so that they can assess students to see if they're successful in those rubrics. They're also talking about instruction, they're also talking about reteaching. So I don't know if there's a perfect timeline. There's a lot of rubrics that already exist. It's more coming to clarity and how we're providing that information to our kids so that they know what they're learning and so that we know what we're teaching.
No, I totally get that, and I understand that. I think that just the same thing like with alphabet soup, right? Like there was a huge learning curve for me when I came on the board to understand all of the different acronyms everybody was talking about, because you all use them day in and day out. I don't. And so I had a cheat sheet of, okay, when they say ABC, this is what they're talking about. I think that when you're looking at the community or you're looking at parents who come from a different background besides education, which the majority of them do. So you're talking about, for instance, business people, right? You have a business plan and it tells you your timeline for executing X, Y, and Z. And you have to say what the return on your investment is going to be. And so, like when I present a plan, I have to let my boss know what my plan of execution and implementation is going to be, which y'all have done with the phase 1, phase 2, and phase 3 schools. What I'm asking for, and I think would be easier for the rest of the board to understand and parents is, we're talking about unwrapping these standards and we're talking about rubrics and we know that it's intensive and we already have some and we're adapting others. But even if you can put together some sort of, phase 1 of all of this is already done because we already have standards from the state. Phase 2 of it is, common rubrics. And this is what this looks like. And when we're talking about common rubrics, this is what they're doing. And then phase 3 looks like this. And then kind of explain how long each of those phases are going to take for 9th through 11 English to be done, and not to be done, right? Because we're always constantly redeveloping and assessing and changing. But for the base part of it to be complete before there's those revisions. So if there's 25 standards for freshman English, we want to have all of these standards unwrapped to the point that makes sense for our teachers to do that by, the end of the 2023 school year.
I think Mrs. Graham wants to answer.
Yeah, does that make sense?
Do you want to go? So exciting. President O'Brien, Ms. Reed, I'm going to go first.
Okay, Dr. Tunis.
I think to some degree, yes, we could do that. There are ideas around this that are exciting that this work leads to, which is like Dr. Galligan and I have a meeting coming up next week talking about what is the cycle of looking at essential standards and how many essential standards should we have. Like you mentioned, 25, that's too many. So that is part of the process though, right, is continuing to look at our essential standards, becoming more clear in the work that we're asking our teachers to guarantee that all of our kids know. So yes, I think we could have a schedule to some, I hear your point of phase 1, this is what's already done. This could be phase 2, which would include looking at essential standards and maybe breaking them down into learning progressions. The point still exists that like the work still comes from the teacher teams, which is why we're so grateful for the Fridays and the 90-minute early release time, because that's really where the clarity comes from, is when people talk, when teams of teachers get together and amongst themselves decide, oh, that's what that means. This is how we're going to teach it, and this is how we're going to reteach it when they didn't get it.
Is a skill and a learning, sorry, Mrs. Graham, I will let you have a turn, but you guys, words matter. And so, and as Mrs. Reed said, you all have your own language. Is a skill and a learning progression the same?
A learning progression generally includes the skill and the content. So like what you're learning along with like how you're learning, which is the skill.
Okay. All right. Mrs. Graham's turn.
Thank you. President O'Brien, members of the board, Dr. Finch. The work is never done.
Right.
So when we, in our multi-school collaborative team, so our MSCTs, we made a collective commitment to meet every quarter. So every grade level content area every quarter. And they get a full day release. And they sit down and they look at what is essential this quarter, what are the resources we have, and what essential standards are we breaking down, what are the progressions, and then they create their rubrics. What we're finding is that after one full year of an entire cycle, it makes the work so much easier. Because at that point, we're looking at refining, and we're looking at making it better, and we're looking at our individual students and their data, and we're having those rich conversations instead of spending so much time breaking everything down. But what we're also finding is that with the rubrics that the state gives us, especially at the level 4, they're not specific enough. And the conversations we're having with our teachers and the teachers are having are very rich and amazing. And we come back to the table and look at them and say, okay, this needs to be measurable. It needs to be much better than arbitrary. And we create measurable rubrics for level 4 or level 3. So it's never ending, but it's refining. And every time we meet, it gets easier.
And that's very exciting. Your enthusiasm, I can feel it. However, when you're sitting on this side and you have heard in these presentations that the rubrics are all there, right? That this isn't necessarily, I mean, I'm not saying that you said this, but this is how I hear that, is that means that there's not a whole lot of work out there for additional work, right? Because I'm concerned, like my fellow board members, and I know you're concerned as well, but about additional workload and burning out teachers. So my question to then my high schools, and Dr. Salk, you've had it the longest, but teachers are doing standard-based grading without rubrics at your school? Is that, because I felt like that's what I heard Dr. Tunis say, and and I'll come back to you in just one second. But so, Dr. Miller or either one.
Yeah, President O'Brien, governing board members, no, they're not flying blind. It's not that they don't have rubrics. They have the rubrics, and like what I heard Dr. T say was we're refining them. They bring the rubrics that we have to those meetings to refine them. I think if I've been sitting here processing, so just hear me out if you would, please. In our entity, we have to, we're to this point now that, I don't know how I want to word this in the best way, that we need to make sure we're doing the right work. Maybe that's a better way to put it. Our teachers always work hard, but as we get more research, as we get more information, we're trying to guide them to do the right work. And 2 years ago, the definition I gave our staff was like, we're a fine-tuned Ferrari, and we just have to do little tweaks on that. Now, obviously, knowing who we were and knowing who I know now, we were probably like a Volkswagen or something. But my point is, we're always continuing to learn. I think what I would ask is, I guess the trust or that we know where we can guide our staff to say, this is the work we need to do, not working over here, working so hard. Because like Mrs. Graham said, once we get those refining, because it's been easier for us, when you ask how long we've been doing standards-based grading, officially 2 years, but ever since I got there, 10 years ago, we've been working towards this model or this effort, and we do have some good things going. It is a little more difficult in some contents. I've noticed, especially this year, in math, it becomes a little more difficult than it does in some of the ELA and social studies, but it's not that we didn't have rubrics before. We had the rubrics. It's our job, I think, to guide them, to refine those rubrics, and with the expertise that Dr. Galligan, Dr. Tunis, and the staff at district can give our people, it helps refine them to get tighter and tighter and tighter, which makes us better and better and better, if that makes sense.
It does make sense. And I appreciate the work smarter, not harder model, because in that model, I would hope then that our teachers would have more time to enjoy family life, or they're relaxed, whatever they do to relax, whatever that is. I am all about reducing workload and doing it smarter. And I don't ever doubt that we're all trying to work towards being better for our kids and our students. I think the struggle is in the magnitude of the effort that is being taken on. And I don't want to rehash all of this stuff. I want to get us to a point of how do we move forward in a way that is positive for our students, our families, our staff, and our community, so it's positive. And unfortunately, I think sometimes folks get so excited and caught up, and it's great work, and I love it, and that's awesome, except that there's other folks who we didn't bring along in the right way. And I apologize, I don't remember the student's name right off the top of my head. Brendan, right? It's about implementation, and we definitely struggled there. So my part in understanding this better, and is that how do we move forward? And so I'm going to let Mrs. Reed go because I've interrupted her several times.
It's okay. But to Ms. Bryan's point, my request would be, as other schools are coming on to standards-based grading, that there would be a partnership established with the schools that are currently doing standards-based grading, so that there could be an informal, let's call it an informal assessment of where are you right now in standards-based mindset, right, for the schools that are coming on. Where are you at standards-based mindset? Let us see what you're doing. And then you can compare where you were when you started standards-based grading to where these schools currently are, and help teach them some of the lessons that you have learned, so that maybe those schools and teachers and students and parents could avoid some of the pitfalls that you fell into, and you can ease the burden and smooth that road a little bit over. Because Melissa was here from Esperanza, right? And she was talking about how she was excited to be, another school that was coming on board. And I think that is great. And I think what would have made it better is if she would have had a partner school that said, hey, it looks like you're ready, but pay attention to these 4 points because we thought we were ready to, and these were the things that we, overlooked, or, these are the things that happened. And so that would be one suggestion I would have. And then the other one, when we're talking about implementation, is I think it would be really helpful for us to review again, or for you to provide the information how we're going to have a continuum of fidelity, right? So if we're a unified school district, we should all be doing the same things, right? Like schools should be doing the same things. So how are we ensuring that that's going to happen as through the next phase of rollouts? Because, it didn't always happen. And we've heard from, parents at one school that, Union Park's knocking it out of the park, right? They're doing a great job. But we've heard from other students and families at other schools that, they're not having that same experience. So how do we even out the playing field and make it smooth where everybody's winning? So that would be another thing that would be helpful to know. One thing that I think we talked about, and I'm sorry, I can't remember exactly what meeting it was, and I know we're doing all of these curriculum adoptions and different things like that, and I think some of the teachers, either when they were speaking or in emails that we have gotten, not all of the curriculum is easily taught. The curriculum that we currently have is not all easily taught with standards-based grading. And so it would be really helpful to have our CIASs or somebody look through that curriculum and make sure that we are providing our teachers with all of the resources that they need in order to do standards-based grading with efficacy. And we're providing additional resources. The curriculum that we adopted 7 years ago doesn't currently, or last year, doesn't currently meet that. And I know when I taught, I used to have to go try and find, curriculum to fill the holes and the gaps. But with the scrutiny that teachers are under right now, and with, lesson plans having to be provided and well in advance, and parents wanting to know what's going on, it would be easier if the district provided that so the district knows what's being taught within the classroom. And it's not putting teachers at risk because they went on to Teachers Pay Teachers and pulled a worksheet that they thought was okay, but turned out it wasn't. So that would be helpful. Sorry, I'm going to go through all of these really fast because we're getting late here. I feel like we've heard from a lot of groups. We've heard from parents and teachers and admins who love standards-based grading, that are doing it and they love it. We've heard from teachers and parents who are not doing standards-based grading and they don't want to. They hate it. The one group that I haven't heard from are teachers who are doing standards-based grading and don't like it. And I would love to hear from some of those teachers to understand what the issue is. We heard it last year, but I think because it was so new, it was just that change. I want to know the teachers that are doing it this year in year 2 that are still having issues with it and what those issues might be. That would be helpful for me. So if there's a teacher that's out there and you would like to send an email to the board, I think that would be helpful for us to understand what the issues still are. And
to her point, I'd like more than one and in different subjects. I mean, I'd love to believe that everybody loves standard-based grading that's doing it, but I'm guessing there are a few out there that are struggling. They don't have to hate it, but they might be struggling it, right?
Or, how to manage it all, how to find time to do all of these things. It would just be, that's the one area that I really haven't heard from. That would be helpful. And the last thing, and this is just a thing to keep in mind, and my recommendation For next year, the schools that are in transition right now, the kids are at a little bit of a disservice when it comes to retaking tests, retaking assessments, because the teachers in the schools are able to make up their own rules around those, whereas the schools that are doing standards-based grading, it's all the same. So some of the feedback I've gotten from parents that are at transition schools, right, schools that will be transitioning to standards-based grading next year, the year after, is that, in ELA, my student can't retake an assessment unless they get underneath an 80. Well, then let's say little Johnny gets a 75 in his first round of the test, he retakes it, he gets 100%. But Susie gets an 80 and she can't retake it even though she wants to. So now little Johnny has a higher grade than little Susie does. And I just don't think that that's fair. If we're going to allow kids to retake tests, then it should be unified across the schools and across the district of, if you have your work done, you have all of your boxes checked, your homework, your classwork, you've shown me that you've done the practice, which I think the majority of teachers that allow retests do. There has to be certain things that all of the kids should be able to retake it if they want to improve their grade. I was one of those kids, if I got a 95, I wanted to know what I could do to get 100. My kids aren't all wired that way. I have one kid that is, but I think that kids, if they are like that, they should be able to be given that opportunity if we're with some of our schools that are doing standards-based grading. So that's it. I'm done, I think.
You're good? Mrs. Fisher, anything else?
Yeah, actually, I have heard from the teachers who are currently doing it. I have heard from some that are afraid of it and they don't want to also. But I have heard from teachers who are doing it and are miserable. I have heard from teachers who are saying, if this is the direction Deer Valley is going to go, I'm going to leave. I have heard parents who say, if this is the direction Deer Valley is going to go, I'm going to withdraw my children. My request is not that we continue to move forward. My request is that we stop. Do not put anything more forward until we actually determine if this is beneficial or harmful for our district. I would like to see some stats on how many employees we are losing. We always lose a lot. We always gain a lot. That's the nature of public education. But I would like to see if we can see a difference in the amount as we have gone into the standards-based grading. Some of the teachers that have contacted me have said that they came to Deer Valley running from their district that was in standards-based grading. And now they're here. And now they are looking where to run next. I do not think it's responsible to continue to push forward, to force a move into everyone doing standards-based grading when we don't know that that is going to remain. Because we do have such, so many people who are just, they're on one side or the other, but there are a lot who are on the side of, we can't do this. Unfortunately, some of the ones who have messaged me have also said that they are fearful to come to a meeting. They are fearful to put their name on a paper because they are fearful of the repercussions that will come to them. I have had teachers tell me that they have been asked to come to speak for standards-based grading, and they will do so even though they do not want standards-based grading because they are afraid of the fallout that will come to them if they don't. So I just think this is a much larger issue. I don't think it's going to just be solved in a presentation or another presentation or 3 more presentations of why we should, or and so I do believe that we are on a cliff that we're about to jump off of, and there is no parachute on our backs. So I'm asking that we stop and evaluate this again. It's an ask. Whether it would even be considered, probably not, but it's an ask. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Fisher. Mrs. Ordway?
Dr. Stolk, you were going to just say something when Mrs. Reed talked about Esperanza and Melissa. I think you were going to comment on having a partner that's jumping in the game.
Well, Mrs. Reed said so many amazing things that I was sitting here nodding. As I think about, I actually invited teachers to come speak that would be able to share where their greatest challenges and difficulties have been, some of which were not on board with standards-based grading years ago. And the work they've enjoyed really does include our rubrics were not in good shape and needed to be updated, and in the ahas that they had as they updated those. I think some of our teachers on our campus would share the software that we use, and not just Power Schools, but other software programs. Technology can be a friend, and technology can be a whole lot more work. And so I think those are the things that are difficult to sort through when we're having the conversations, and we may not use the right terms or the same terms, but total quality management, when teachers say, here's what we think will help improve, take us to the next step, solve some of those challenges for us. Those are the conversations that we're having on campus, not about whether or not it's the right work, but how can we focus on the things that most impact student learning and not get over here in some of the other work. And so as we talk about in our region passionately, and Melissa is one of those, really we have that shared desire to make sure the kids move from kindergarten all the way through 12th grade. And we've identified where those kids are struggling over here, but we need the work to be about their learning and moving information forward so the next teacher can take those kids and take them to the next level with the learning. And for the first time, we're having those conversations about student learning, the skills, the behaviors, the skills, the work habits, all of those things tying in. And the rubric work, that's not the piece that the teachers, I think, would share with us if they were here in the room. But we're looking for what did they feel was extra work that was worth their time, that gave them energy, that let them go home at the end of the PLC time recharged again. And what are we able to pass on to those new teachers? And I have a new teacher starting tomorrow. And we're very excited to be able to say that the rest of the team can say, here are the rubrics, and here's the things that we've run into that were problems with the grade book or with grading, and we can save you time. And we couldn't do that even 6 years ago. Right? So I was just having those thoughts that definitely we need that, what's the next step from our teachers, and they're the ones who can give us the best next pieces of information. So thank you for asking.
And thank you for that. Dr. Silk, I think you hit on a couple, though. A really good point there is that it's important for us to know what is hindering the teachers. If it's technology, is it part of the process? We need to know. I know there have been some concerns with Power Schools because we made some adjustments. If there's other technologies that make it difficult, those are, and there's a fix or a solution, and maybe they don't know what it is, but we need to, right? You need to identify the problem before you can identify the solution. If it comes with a suggested solution, that's great. If it doesn't, and there's other people that need to figure it out, I think that is helpful too. This discussion has been helpful to me and hopefully to my fellow board members. I know we've asked for more information, and I think we'll need to still have some continued discussion centered around the points that we've brought up tonight. So I appreciate everybody's extra time and being here. Dr. Finch?
Can I add a couple of things? What I'm noticing is what's happening is it's the shift from the teacher being the center to the student being the center. That's different. Before, we waited until the teacher gave us 80, 90, 100. Now the kid knows what that 80 means, or what a 2 mean, what's a 3 mean. That, to me, that's what's the big difference. The student is now the center and can drill down to what the kid is really missing and how to intervene and how to make up that learning gap. And I remember, I've been in this business a while, I remember when people freaked out when the calculator was coming to your local classroom. And it was the end of the world. And we survived that. And the same thing happened when the local iPad a local computer came to your classroom. We freaked out about that as well. It's change. It's different. This is different. This is the next evolution of teaching and learning, where the student is the center. No longer is it really about good teaching. It's about good learning now. And that's the next level. And that's why we have these people in the trenches learning, using research to prove that this is going to be better for students. And we already are seeing the data. You have anecdotal, you have these people sitting here tonight, principals, but we also have other research that says the exact same thing. So, but I think the most important part is what Paula, or Dr. T, mentioned, is the work that teachers use to break things down. Then they start understanding why we teach it. That's the difference. And so when you can now compare to each other and get on the same page, we get a better student as they go through the system. So Goldwater's been doing this for over a decade. We have no evidence that Goldwater students are somehow jumping off the cliff without a parachute. We've been doing this a long time. We're just trying to catch up to Goldwater. And so that's what we're trying to do. So I like where we're headed. I like the work that goes into it. This discussion is great. But this is the next evolution of teaching and learning. And Deer Valley, again, is leading the pack. And there are also, there was work that comes when you're out front. You get more criticism when you're out front. But I'd hate to put us on pause and then wait a decade till the rest of the state catches up to us. So good job. Thanks.
And with that, I would take a motion
Mr.
to,
Brown?
oh yes, Mrs. Fisher.
Since Mr. Finch says that there is actual data of success, can that be provided to us? I have not seen any actual data of success. So if he could get that to us, it'd be great.
Yes, ma'am, we'll get that provided, if not this Friday, in the next Friday update, or well, one, 2 weeks, because there won't be one over Thanksgiving. Okay, I'll take that motion
So
to
moved.
adjourn at whatever time it is, 9:24.
So moved.
Second?
Yep, second.
All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye, meeting's adjourned.
Yay.